I'm going to be gone next week, but I should be back the week after that. So I'm going to Japan to see my new granddaughter. So, yeah. Number 7, and soon number 8 in February. Yay! More grandkids. Fill a pew or two. That's the point, right? Okay, so just to remind you, what are we about? The Greek worldview is that you have Theos, God, in the plenum of everything. Plenum of everything. This is right out of Socrates. This is basic Greek kind of stuff. And that God created, the Greek system is interesting, but God created. This is the Christian viewpoint on the Greek system. So God created the cosmos. So within the plenum of everything, there is the created universe, the created cosmos. That's what we call the cosmos. And we've seen that word lots of times, right? Within the cosmos, there is the philosophia. Philosophia. Philosophia is what man can know. So it is those things that are both physical and non-physical. And you say, what are non-physical? Mathematics are non-physical, emotions are non-physical, thoughts are non-physical. Those are the things that man can know. You can't know everything in the cosmos, that's impossible, but there are things that man can know, and they are defined by the capability of knowledge. And then within the philosophia is the gay. The gay is the physical world. That is, those things that we can measure. And so, we have the scientific method, which is the way that we can know things that are repeatable. We have the historical method, which allows us to know things that are non-repeatable. And then there is logic, which allows us, logic is the way that you can know the philosophia. So the great example is I can't ever know your thoughts. You may tell me your thoughts, but how do I know they're really your thoughts, right? I'll never know them. Logically, I can look at your face, and if you're looking at me like this, I like you. I really like you. Yeah, I can use logic and say, well, maybe you're not exactly telling me the truth. But see, that's what logic allows you to do. And of course, logic and reasoning gives you mathematics. So we are looking at the most important thing to the Hebrews. I don't know if it's the most important thing to modern society. Modern society seems to be going off on a really weird line. But in the ancient world, the most important thing to the Greeks and to the Romans and to the Egyptians and to the Hebrews was, how do I get to God? I mean, logically, the Greeks would say logically you can't get to God, right? Because the cosmos includes those things which are outside of philosophia. And to get to God, I got to go through the cosmos, basically, right? Actually, God is everywhere in the thought, in Greek thought, but how do I get to God? And the answer from the Hebraic standpoint is the metaepithumia. That is, the metaepithumia is the line of the sacrifice going from man to God. And so Hebrews is all about the metaepithumia. The metaepithumia, though, is Christ, who is God, who is also the sacrifice and is man and the high priest. So we have in Christ represented God, man, and the sacrifice. And that sacrifice, because it proceeds from God, and because of God, it is therefore an eternal line, an eternal connection from man to God. An eternal Wi-Fi from man to God. No kidding. Because the origin is God, the sacrifice is God, and it was from God who was Christ, who was also man. And so this is basically the point of Hebrews. Very complex document. And so that's just to get you in the flavor, get you the feel. And so for the words of the day, let's see what the words are. You've basically had both these words. I'm sorry, the repeats, but that's okay because these are very important words within the context. Leitourgias. Liet is Laos, this people. People. Ergion. Ergion. People's work. People's work. The point of this is a Roman term. The Roman term is, this is the work that is done by the public servants. The idea of public servants, all right, we think public servants have always been there since eternity, right? But who invented public servants? Really, the Romans, okay? The Greeks didn't care, right? If there was whatever in the streets, you know, if you didn't clean it up, it's kind of like Germany, right? In Germany, the Hausfrau, the Putzfrau, or the Hausfrau, the woman in the house is out cleaning the gutters and the street every day because she doesn't want garbage in her street. She doesn't wait like we do, like Dayton, right? Or the Wichita, like sweeper guys come through. So we got sweeper services, where in Germany, they clean the streets themselves because it's their responsibility, it's their house. So the idea of this liturgios, which is the people's work, is an idea that comes from Roman thought. However, what happened in Hebrews, and I'm going to disagree with this from our translator's standpoint, because this word is usually translated, if you look down at the bottom, as ministration or service. And as Hebrews applies it, they apply it within the context of the service of the priests. Now that's really cute, because it kind of is, right? What's the problem with this, though, in some respect? Or, not so much what's the problem. If it's a Roman term, meaning a Roman kind of thing that came from the Romans, how come they're applying it within the context of a Hebrew worship? Well, that goes back to, who is this document written for, right? And we call it the Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews. Which, by the way, where's the title?
Nowhere.
Yeah, there ain't no title. Because the title is a thing, but it does say it's a letter to the Hebrews right at the beginning, right? The thing is, we've plucked it out. The point is that this is what we've been trying to show the whole time. This isn't just a letter to the Hebrews. This is quite obviously a letter to the Romans, to the Greeks, to the Egyptians, and to the Hebrews, probably all in Alexandria. So, when we find this, this is a trick, right? The trick in interpreting ancient literature isn't just what it says many times, because is it going to tell you? It's likely not going to tell you in the context. This is a letter to the Romans and to the Greeks and to the Hebrews and to the Egyptians in Alexandria, right? It's going to tell you how. By the words it uses and by the way it talks to people. Just like we see Paul talking to the Greeks and saying, charis. Would he ever say charis to a Hebrew? No. He would have said shalom, or he would say arena in Greek. He would say, peace be to you, right? In fact, that's what we say, peace be to you. The Greeks always said charis because that was their mode of greeting and their mode of also leaving. It's like ciao in Latin or in Italian, right? In Latin, though, the Romans were interested, like we've talked about, in doxa, Greek. The Egyptians are interested in dead stuff. They're big time into dead stuff. Their language really didn't get incorporated except in the Osirian cycle, the Osirian Mysterion. So the way we might see Egyptian stuff, how might we see Egyptian stuff? If we see evidence of Mysterion, right? depending on what the words are used for the mysterion. So in ancient documents, what we do is we look for these clues, and the clues tell us more about the text than sometimes the direct language. Because remember, Greek is a concrete language. Greek is absolutely concrete. But the writers were probably Hebrews, right? Trying to write good Greek. And what do we know about Hebrew? Hebrew is a very, I like to use the word slippery, but it's a non-concrete, it's a euphemistic language like our language. So very euphemistic. Very interesting mix. So we expect to see concrete language in the Greek, but yet there may be, always there will be clues. Yes, sir?
I think liturgias is the root word for our current word liturgy that we use in terms of church services. What the congregation does in the church service is the liturgy.
That is correct, and that is Roman, right? It comes from the Roman word. And by the way, this is a Roman borrowed word that the Greeks, we're not sure who started it, okay? But I suspect the Romans started borrowing from the Greek. That's just my thoughts. If you look at the explanation from it, you'll see that. In any case, this other word is really an important word, I think. S-K or S-C-E-U-E. Skuie, skuios. This word means a vessel, and it's usually translated vessel or implement. But the problem about this word is this is not just a word that means vessel. If I wanted to use a word for vessel or a pot or a pan or something like that in Greek, I could use, there are other words I can use. This word specifically, very specifically, relates, as you can see in the notes there, as a wife, specifically a wife contributing to the usefulness of her husband. So when you see this word in Greek, skuios, which we see a lot in the New Testament, it is not just a throwaway word that means a vessel or implement. It implies a bunch of things. It implies, number one, occupation. It implies usefulness. And it implies matrimony. Or matrimony is a what kind of agreement? What kind of deal? We also
legal.
Legal in what sense? What do we call it? We have a name for it.
Contract.
Not just a contract.
License.
Covenant. A covenant. It's a covenant. You will see this used in the New Testament. What really is interesting to me is, you know how modern scholars have reinterpreted, the New Testament and say, well, here's Paul, and Paul says, Chris, no matter if you're free or slave or man or woman, right? That's the gospel's for you, right? It's all equal. All are equal under Christ, right? That's what Paul said. How can you misinterpret or reinterpret that, right? But modern scholars have reinterpreted Paul to be sexist and bigoted and,
Probably homophobic.
every phobic, okay? We're talking about, Paul is suddenly the patriot side, right? Well, how can you get it from a guy who says, in Christ all are free? All. And even lists it just so you don't get it. He didn't say all men are free. He didn't say all, of these people are free. All rich people are free, right? He said all men, women, slaves. He included them everything, right? And so when you see this word, what I think it reminds us of is the writers, and what's interesting is we see this word used by Paul a lot. We do see it in the Gospels, not that much, because there's not much occasion for that term. But then we see it in Hebrews. Hebrews is a late date letter. So if Hebrews has got it, what does that tell us? What's the view of the church?
Inclusive.
inclusive, and not just inclusive, but inclusive to the point of using Greek vocabulary that means, and like I said, this isn't a throwaway word, so when we see this word in context, we should not just assume that it means vessels or implements or, a fork or knife or spoon. We've got to look a little deeper at the word, because when Paul used a word, or the Greeks used a word, or in this case, who knows, the authors of Hebrews used the word, what do they mean? They meant that specific word. They had a lot of word choices they could have used, but they used those words. And that's what I think I'm trying to get as the whole point of this, right? Our translators sometimes don't give us exactly the words that we'd like. Or sometimes our translators play fast and loose with the obvious words in the text, right, in the Greek. And what we need to do is look deeper into those words and see what they actually mean and say. So with that, we are at 9:19, and let me see. The thing that I wanted to mention about 9:19, we already went through it. Let me read it again in the NIV. I won't go back through it in the Greek, but I'll read the literal translation in the Greek. When Moses had proclaimed every commandment of the law to all the people, he took the blood of calves together with water, scarlet wool, and branch of hyssop, and sprinkled the scroll and all the people. Assigning a reason, Moses uttered words, every injunction that set telos, to all the people down the Torah. He took the blood of young bullocks and of he-goats and made showers of water and crimson-colored wool and hyssop. He sprinkled both the roll of papyrus and all the people. Let's look at the context. This is what I wanted to do before. We didn't have time last week. The context of this is Exodus 24, 1 through 18. And I'm going to read the whole thing. 1. Then he said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance. But Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him. Then Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws. They responded with one voice, everything the Lord has said we will do. Get this in 4. Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he set young Israelite men, listen very carefully, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Stop right there. Remember our offerings? In the Old Testament, in the temple, the first offering is the ascension offering. The second offering is the sin offering. The third offering is the guilt. Sin and guilt are together offerings. If you didn't have a sin offering, you apply a guilt offering because, and remember, these offerings are for the unintentional sins. There is no offering, there is no sacrifice for intentional sin. There's no way you can get rid of intentional sin in the Old Testament thing. So one was for sin that was obvious to you, one was for sin that wasn't obvious to you, but you had to do one of these or the other. The fourth sacrifice is the priest's sacrifice. That is the grain sacrifice with the frankincense on top. You pulled off the top part with the frankincense, you burn that. The priest got the rest of the grain. And the fifth sacrifice was the thanksgiving or fellowship. The rabbis tell us that the only sacrifice required in the Messianic age is
Thanksgiving.
the Thanksgiving sacrifice. Now this is what's important about 4. Then he sent the young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood in 6 and put it in bowls. In bowls. And the other half he sprinkled on the altar. Where did he get the blood? From what sacrifice?
Fellowship.
From the fellowship. Why? How do you know that? Well, the burnt offering, what happens when you do the burnt offering? I haven't taught this in a long time, but what do?
Gotta kill them.
It's called a Holocaust offering. It's a Holocaust offering because it's all burned. The only thing that's not burned is the skin. So when you burn the offering, when you do a burnt offering, and this is back 10 years ago when I taught this class about the Torah and about, the offerings of the Torah, we looked deep at that. And the specific thing is that the burnt offerings are burnt. There's no blood left over to blood. So the blood had to come from the Thanksgiving offering. This isn't about sin. This isn't about sin. That's what the point is. It says, then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. And they responded, we will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey. Now the question is, what is the book of the covenant? Don't answer that question yet. You notice it says that Moses wrote down everything God told him, and now he's got the book of the covenant. 8, and this is a quote that comes to us in 19. Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, this is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. 9. Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the Lord God of Israel. Under his feet was something like pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky itself. But God did not raise his hands against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. If you see God, what's supposed to happen to you? You're supposed to die. They saw God, and they did not die. Which manifestation of God did they see? Jesus. God the Father, God the Son. Remember, if you remember this, remember what C.S. Lewis writes to us. A four-dimensional God depicted in 3 dimensions gives you 3 pictures, 3 sides. And so one side, the Almighty God, if you see him, you will be dead. You die, period, right? One side, God, the Christ, Jesus. If you see him, apparently you will die. And the other one, God the Holy Spirit. Has anyone ever seen the Holy Spirit? No, it's an invisible creature, being, that is God, but it's invisible. You see these clues? Aren't these neat clues? These are like Blue's Clues, right? Blue's Clues in the New and Old Testament. I love this stuff. Then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone, the law and commands I have written for their instruction. Now tell me, what was the book of the covenant? The Jews believe that when Moses went up to God, God gave him the Torah on the stones. But we also know that the Old Testament tells us that Moses was writing stuff down. Do we have a book of the covenant? No. You ever seen one? I haven't seen it. The Jews do not call the book of the covenant the Torah. I don't know what the book of the covenant is. Is there a lost book? Maybe. Is it incorporated in the Torah? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just telling you, the Jews believe that when Moses came down with the stones, they incorporated the entire Torah. And remember, we know that's possible, not only because God could probably write whatever he wants on this tablet of stone, but the big deal is that all ancient writing is mnemonics. So it's not meant to include every single vowel. There's no vowels in Hebrew anyway. And by the way, they weren't probably writing in Hebrew, they're probably writing in Egyptian, Syriac script, because they were writing on papyrus. What did they write on in the Promised Land, in Babylon, in that area? Yeah, clay, cuneiform, right? They did cuneiform. They did cuneiform. The Egyptians did papyrus and stone. The hieroglyphics are on stone. The hieratic and Socratic script are on papyrus. We know for a fact, and by the way, the author in the New Testament tells us, the authors in Hebrews tells us it was a biblion, which is papyrus. Just saying. Then Moses set out with Joshua's aid, and Moses went up on the mountain of God, and he said to the elders, "Wait for us until we come back to you. Aaron and Hur are with you, and anyone involved in a dispute can go to them." Then Moses, and apparently Joshua, went up to the mountain, and a cloud covered it. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the seventh day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. This is where he gets the Ten Commandments. And there's more to this. There's more to this story, as Paul Harvey said. But the context of the verse that we have in 19 comes directly from this. And the point I want to make, the point that I think is really, really important to us, is we are talking about not sin, but a fellowship or a thanksgiving offering, and him taking the blood from them. Where do we usually hear about taking the blood? There's 3 instances of taking blood. This is one of them. What are the other 2 instances of blood being used? Passover. Passover, you put the blood on the upper part of the transom and on each side. Kind of like hands, yeah, interesting. Anyway, in a cross form, cruix form, right? Cuneiform. What's the other one?
Last Supper.
No, I'm talking about the Jewish Old Testament temple. When is the other time that blood is used?
So when they dedicated the altar?
Kinda-ish. That's really close, really close. When they did the altar thing, you're thinking about, that's in Yom Kippur. That's at the end of the end of the year. They would use water to purify. But the time they use blood is the scapegoat. You guys remember the scapegoat? Okay? The scapegoat was not for intentional sin. The scapegoat was for unintentional sin that you forgot about. That you just didn't happen to do. You couldn't afford the guilt sacrifice. You didn't do it. You forgot about it. Every person that went up to the temple didn't do. The ascension sacrifice was done by the priests every day. Josephus tells us this. So the priest did the ascension sacrifice every day for everyone coming to the temple. You didn't have to bring a sin or guilt. It's kind of considered bad form if you didn't. If you came up to Jerusalem, you're supposed to do a sin or guilt, but not everybody could afford it, right? So not everybody did the sin or guilt sacrifice. The priest sacrifice was, you better do it, right? Because the priest expected his pay, and that's where he got his grain from. And by the way, if you didn't give the priest his sacrifice, what would he not let you do? The Thanksgiving sacrifice. Thanksgiving sacrifice, where you brought up your meat, your tithes, and your offerings, and who ate it? You did. You ate it. You shared with the priests, but you ate it. You were the one. And so the Thanksgiving sacrifice is, in the Mysterion concept, the meal with the deity. It's a meal with the deity. And so you had a meal with God. You shared your bounty with God. This is where the tithe went. The tithe is, and that's what Malachi tells us. In Malachi it says, do not store up the tithe, because what was supposed to happen to the tithe? You're supposed to eat it before God. That was the meal that you had with God. It's the Thanksgiving sacrifice. What do we do in the Eucharist? Do we take the Eucharist and save it? Do you put it in your purse and take it home and keep it? No, you eat it because it is the Thanksgiving sacrifice. You are celebrating Christ and God within it. That's the concept. And so it's really important for us to see this, that this was not for sin. This specific one we're talking about relies specifically on something else. And we'll see it in 20. Let's go to 20. 20 says, and we'll go through the Greek on this one. I got lots of notes here. 20. Here's the NIV. He said, "This is the blood of the covenant which God commanded you to keep." And why don't I have this? I think that it refers back to Exodus 24:8. In any case, say. It doesn't say he said, it says say, Lego. It's not said either, it's Lego. It's logical argument. Toto. That thing, he is added. The hamia, the blood of the diatheke, disposition, which God hath enjoined. It's in telomai. In telomai. In telomai. In telos. Remember, we had in telos? In telos. A telos is a unstated conclusion, but an in telos is a stated injunction. It's supposed to be a stated conclusion, but the Greeks don't like that because they don't like a stated conclusion. So therefore, it is an injunction, like, for example, a law that I put down. It's a stated specific point. So, saying, the diatheke which God had enjoined, he set a limit. He set a limit. A in telos is a set limit. I'll remind you. So if I have a telos, here's the telos. It's the vanishing point on the horizon, right? If I set the telos, it has a singular vanishing point, and therefore a singular limit, right? Okay, I'm not going to teach math. You'll be happy with that, right? But you guys remember that limit theory stuff? You have a limit, and the limit, you always depict it, right? 0 to 1, infinity, right? Set of integers, blah, 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 blah. It's a set limit. So anyway, it's a mathematical, geometric kind of concept. So, to God hath enjoined, he's completed or set a limit toward you, unto you, toward you. It's not unto, it's toward you. So, arguing, here's the Greek literal. Arguing that thing, the blood of disposition, which God hath set the limit, completed toward you. In other words, what Moses did and what Jesus did in this context isn't about sin, it's about the covenant, right? So the covenant, and they talk about a new covenant, the first covenant from Moses. And by the way, our first covenant wasn't the Mosaic covenant. The Mosaic covenant was to the Hebrews, but what was our first covenant? The Noahic covenant, right? And actually, if you want to go back further, there was the Adamic covenant, and there is a covenant after that. There is a covenant given to Adam, then there's a covenant given to Adam and Eve, right? And then there is the Noahic covenant, and then there is the Mosaic covenant. We, as Gentiles, are covered by the Noahic covenant. And writing to the Hebrews, though, the point is not to say that the Gentiles are under that covenant, but rather in the new covenant, what did Moses do? Moses took the blood, right, from the fellowship sacrifice, and he sprinkled it on the people. What did Jesus do in reflection with his sacrifice? It's all figurative, right? But the point is that his blood, and what do we say? His blood washes away sin, covers us all, right? It's not just the blood of repentance. It's the blood of the covenant. And, you know, this is a beautiful thought. Can you imagine this? I mean, this is, we have imagery that builds this for us, because what is our imagery where we image the washing of Christ, of us in the covenant of Christ's blood?
Baptism.
Baptism, yeah. And the Jews did too. It's called the mikvah, right? And so did the Greeks. The Mysterion Greeks did the same thing. And the Romans, the Mysterion Romans did the same thing. And guess what the Egyptians did? When did we're not sure if Egyptians ever washed until the Greeks came by, so maybe they were really happy at being taken over, right? But we do know for a fact that the Egyptians always did what kind of washing? When you were dead, they always washed the corpse. By the way, why do we wash the corpse? You know where that came from, right? Okay. The Egyptians washed the corpse in preparation for mummification or burial. Who borrowed that idea? The Israelites. They took it home. And so we see that when Christ dies and they prepare his body for burial, they do what first? They wash the corpse, and then they apply the unguents, right? The spices, and then they wrap it up. Who did that? Egyptians. Now what do? We don't spice an unguent, but we always wash a corpse. And you wonder where that came from? That wasn't just something we just made up. That wasn't a Celtic thing. That was something that came right out of Egyptian burial ideas. We and the Greeks and the Hebrews and everybody else has also taken that in a figurative standpoint for death. You ever wonder why would you do a mikvah? The mikvah symbolizes death. That's why in baptism we say, you have died in Christ, right? You wonder where that came from. It wasn't because of drowning. It's because when you wash the corpse. Look, okay, I hate to tell you this, but the only time that water ever touched anything but the mouth of a Hebrew, maybe not even then, because they didn't, in the ancient times, they didn't bathe. It took the Greeks and the Romans to bring bathing to them, right? And so they didn't bathe. They didn't see it as an important thing in their life. They may never have been washed until they died. Yeah, exactly. And so they're worried about like skin lessons, right? I'm telling you, Jesus was right on. Yeah, you open your kimono and you've probably got like skin lessons like you wouldn't believe. But the big deal is that the baptism and the mikvah symbolized for them that they were buried, they were dead, they were mummified, their bodies were dead, and therefore they rose again out of the waters as living beings. Isn't it interesting how that predestines or presets the whole concept of resurrection? In any case. So, I want to note this, that a disposition, we talk about a testament, and I didn't give you this the word of the day, but the word is diatheke, which means a disposition. A disposition is a final settlement in a matter with reference to a court ruling. A covenant is a type of legal promise. We use the words interchangeably, but they're not. They're not. A diatheke means it's already done. So when it talks about the diatheke, they don't mean, it's not an agreement. A diatheke is not a marriage agreement that I agree that I'm not going to be doing the wrong things in my marriage. A diatheke means that it's already been completed. In other words, you don't have to wait for the metaepithumia. It's there, it's done, it's complete. The blood is sprinkled, the covenant, the diatheke, the disposition of the courts is complete. And therefore, what does that mean? If, I think Martin Luther most rightly said it. We talk about word and sacrament, right? When he said word and sacrament, he didn't mean that if I sprinkle water on you and I say the right words, you're set. What did he mean when he said word and sacrament? When I baptize you, it's cool. But what do you have to do? He has to accept it, right? He has to accept the point. If he never accepts the baptism, and the point of the baptism, we call it baptism covenant, right? But Paul, or the writer of Hebrews, is saying, once you have accepted, what does that mean? It's a done deal. It's a disposition. Yes, it's not like you're saying to Jesus, okay, Jesus, I believe. And Jesus goes, okay, you believe, but you know what? If you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do the other thing, you don't la la la, and you don't, right? You're not there. Right? We believe that you can lose your salvation. What that really means is that instead, you may have had the sacrament of the baptism, but you have decided in your own heart, you've gone the other way, right? But Jesus is saying that if I have the word and sacrament, if I say to Jesus, hey, dude, I'm with you. Jesus says, cool, it's done.
So there are no more works, there's nothing else you have to do.
There's nothing else you have to do. Now, what's important to note is, what if you don't do anything? Because, well, yeah, where's your words, right? Where's your, the sacrament's there, it took. Well, no, maybe it didn't take. What's wrong with you, right? There's nothing wrong. What's that?
As Paul said, you still might be a baby.
You could be, yeah, you might be a baby, you haven't grown up in your faith. But if you've decided to, see, this goes back to what we love, right? Sarx, psuche, and pneuma. Paul and all the writers of the New Testament, Jesus, in his words, Paul, the writers of Hebrews, they would say, once you have this diatheke with Jesus, what's engaged now? Yeah, your psuche is engaged, and the pneuma allows you to do it, right? So they would say, you see, we make this way too complicated. I think it's because the Greeks were very thinking people. But to the Greeks, when Paul and the other authors stated this to the Greeks, I think a light bulb came on in their heads. They're like, the light bulb was, wow, yeah. And what gave them then the power to do it? Yeah, we would say the Holy Spirit, the pneuma, allowed them to achieve. That's why I go back to the point, the Old Testament is about, we say this ourselves, the Old Testament is about laws, and you better be towing the line. You still better be towing the line today, but the New Testament is about how you can toe the line, right? We make so many excuses for people. Oh, you really shouldn't have killed that guy. I know you're a Christian, right? And you're like, no! If you're a Christian, you ain't going to kill people. You ain't murdering people for a living, right? That's just not the way it works. The reason Paul and everybody else would say, okay, yeah, you can fall back, you can do something wrong, but even today we look and Martin Luther wasn't thinking about sins of like croaking people and stealing stuff out of their houses. He was worried about not worshiping God with his whole heart. Now, if everybody was worried about not worshiping God with his whole heart, I'd be very happy. I think Paul and Silas and everybody would be. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Greeks were saying, this is what they were saying. This is what the Hebrews is telling us. That diatheke, the disposition with Christ, allows us to then Well, let's see what it allows us to do, because that's the point. Let's look at 21. So 21, here's the NIV. In the same way he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and everything used in its ceremonies. Moreover, but, it's not moreover, it's but, he is added, but it's implied by the verb. He, riazo, he sprinkled, and the sprinkle is really cool, it's like raining. With is added, hamia, both, it's not both, it's and, but okay, I'll give it both. Both is not the correct, because it would be a duo form word. Anyway, and the tabernacle, literally the akene, the tent, and pas, all the skuios, the vessels of the ministry of the leotorgia, the public function or the people's work. Here's the Greek. But he sprinkled blood also the tent and all the skuios of public function. Okay, knowing what we know about skuios, what did he sprinkle?
Water?
Well, he sprinkled blood but what, okay, the vessels of the temple imply not just physical junk, but also the people. Yeah, the people working in the temple. And what's really cool about skuios is we know that means it implies the wives. So it wasn't just the priests, it was the priests' wives and families. And so, it's not meant to be a code word, because the readers in this would have immediately known when he used the word skuios, he wasn't talking just about stuff. He wasn't just talking about a stand or a cup. He was talking about all the things that allowed them to make the people's work, the public function. So to make the public function, to make the function of worship, it requires not just the stuff, but the people doing the stuff. He sprinkled the blood also the tent and all the vessels of public function. The implication also, and I think this is really important, is that it wasn't just, like I said, we've got this paternal kind of thing going on, which I think is very detrimental. It's wrong. It's not at all right. This patriarchal kind of view that's being foisted on us by universities. Because like I said, when Paul said, did he not mean what he said when he said all? It included men, women, slaves, and free. Was that countercultural or what? Totally countercultural. Let's 22. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Now we're getting to the forgiveness part. So the disposition of the diatheke. You notice what came first? The covenant came first. Then what's second? Forgiveness. Let's see what it says in the Greek. It's a little bit different. Kai, and, almost, literally shendon, nigh. Not almost, but nigh. All pas, things are added, are is added. Kata, literally down the nomos. Katharizo, purged, not cleansed, purged. Katharizo, catharsis, right? It is not improper to use the word cleanse, but when you say cleanse and you see kathizo, it means to vomit or to have diarrhea. It means like a purging or a cleansing of the body systems. It doesn't mean to take a pot or a pan and clean it. There's a different word in Greek for that. Within, it's not with, it's in blood, and kai, choros, at a permanent separation. That's at choros, remember the chasm? Choris, chasm. Shedding of blood. Hama teskousia. I should have given you this word. It means literally pouring forth of blood. Hama teskousia, pouring forth of blood, is literally genomai, caused to be no emphasis. Emphasis doesn't mean remission. It means freedom. It's literally off, send forth in Greek. So, here's the literal. And nigh all down the Torah, purged in blood, and create a permanent separation, pouring forth of blood, cause to be no freedom. All right, what does that mean? Here's a literal translation, but a more understandable. I tried to put it in a more understandable form. All the purging with blood in the Torah did not result in any freedom. I wish that this is what they said. Here's what it says in NIV. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. That's not what it says. It says, this is what it says. All the purging with blood in the Torah did not result in any freedom. In other words, we see the covenant, the diatheke, being applied. Right? They're not talking about sin or guilt or anything. Matter of fact, they didn't talk about a sin or guilt or a priest sacrifice, did they? They talked about burnt, the ascension sacrifice, Holocaust sacrifice, and they talked about a Thanksgiving sacrifice at the beginning. And using the Thanksgiving sacrifice blood, that enacted the first covenant. And then with the book of the covenant, which is like the Torah, I'll give you, it's probably like the Torah. And now, we number one, become part of the covenant through the shedding of the blood of the Thanksgiving sacrifice, who is Christ. That is the disposition. That is what we would call the covenant, or the testament, right? The New Testament, Old Testament, whatever. The covenant. But all the purging with blood in the Torah did not result in any freedom. Let's go to 23. Here's the NIV. It was necessary then for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. It was necessary then for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Here's the Greek. It was is added. Therefore, un means accordingly. Necessary, anagike, constraint, not necessary, but constraint. That is added. The patterns, the hupodemai, an exhibit for imitation or warning. A hupodemai is an exhibit for imitation or warning. It's not a pattern like the other word we've seen for pattern in Greek. Of things, not of things, it's just ho. In the heavens, oranos, the sky, should is added, be is added. Katharizo, to cleanse or purge, with these, to these, it's tutua, tutui, that's strange. Tutuis, of these, but the heavenly things, the epor and eos, the above the sky. Get that? Okay. Here's the Oranos. The Oranos is part of Gay. Here's the Epe. Let's see, let me spell it. Eporanos. Above the sky. The Eporanos. That's where God is, right? The Eporanos, the above the sky themselves, altos, it's themselves is right. With is added, keriton, stronger thusa sacrifices than these. So here's the literal. Accordingly, constraint the exhibits for imitation or warning that in the sky, in the world, cleansed or purged to these, but above the sky, the cosmos or plane of the eternal, themselves stronger sacrifices near these. And here's more cogent words. Accordingly, the exhibits of the sacrifices that purged the known world were not powerful enough to reach through the cosmos to cleanse the plenum of everything. Now there's some really interesting stuff in here. Let me read that again. Accordingly, the exhibits of the sacrifices that purged the known world were not powerful enough to reach through the cosmos to clean the plenum of everything. So number one, we're talking about the meta-epithumia. We're talking about the meta-epithumia reaching through the epi-Oranos and the Oranos directly to God. But guess what? Who's the sacrifice? God is a sacrifice. So God is doing it all. But the other thing, which we know for a fact, what did man's sin do to God's creation?
Warped it.
It warped and broke it. Yeah. Look, we think, okay, people need to really get a clue about this because this is really important stuff. Adam and Eve, we use Adam and sin, whether you like, metaphor, direct, exact, it doesn't matter. The big point is this. The sin of mankind messed up God's creation. Not just the gay and the philosophia, but the cosmos. Right? And you might think that of the cosmos as God's containment. God doesn't want the badness that's in the cosmos to affect everything else. So what did he have to do? He fixed it. How did he fix it? Jesus Christ. The metaepithumia that's going to God, the sacrifice going to God. So God is fixing the problem of man. The Noah account, right? So he fixed it. But the problem wasn't the world. It wasn't gay. It was man. Yeah, us. God wasn't making a mistake. The point is you're supposed to learn from the Noahic idea, right? The Noahic concept is supposed to tell you that the problem isn't the world. The problem is you. See? And that's why God fixed the problem through Jesus Christ. That's what Hebrews is ultimately telling us. This metaepithumia, this sacrifice, and I think this is a terrible and a beautiful place to have to stop. But just keep in mind this. We'll continue with this. This is about the sacrifice and what it means within the context of the diatheke, of the covenant that Christ has brought, that basically allows you and allows the cosmos to be corrected. Man's still the problem. Jesus is the solution. God is the solution through Jesus Christ. In any case. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us through this week and take care of us. In your name we pray. Amen.
No class next week.
No class next week because...
Great trip.
Thank you.